Episode 7 of the New York State Sports Lucky Number 7. Ricky Keeler back with you here on IU Sports Radio. For all that is sports. On today's show, we start with football. It's the scouting combine for Indianapolis Boys starting today. What should Giants and Jets fans are looking out for? Some Jets are making news, and once again, not making news for the right reasons. We'll dive into that. The player survey is out. What do the players think of the Giants and Jets facilities? We'll talk about that. The Knicks are struggling, but the Rangers are red hot. And remember when we said we wouldn't talk about St. John's again because they kept losing? I think someone listened, and we're going to have to start talking about things some more. It's all coming up right here, right now. New York State Sports. We'll be back in a minute. Once again, welcome back, everybody. You can follow me, Ricky Keeler, on Twitter, at Rickinator555. You can also follow the show on Twitter, at NY State Sports IE. Again, it's at NY State Sports IE. If you're here on the Spreaker app, please feel free to contribute to the chat. I see Terrence here, Jen's here. Welcome to both of you. Hope we'll get some more people over the course of the next hour or so. And as I mentioned, we're going to start with the NFL Scouting Combine. And I'm not the biggest draft person. It's just one of the things I get that the league likes to do, like 6-7 hours of watching guys go through drills and stuff like that. I get it's not the best watch for everybody, but I think there's still some interesting storylines to watch and some interesting position groups. Meaning, because you look at where the Giants and Jets are, and I think that's what we're going to really lead the show with this week, is what position group should each team be watching? And I think you look at the Giants, I'm starting at wide receiver. I think we could talk about quarterback, and everyone's talking about the Giants want to go from 6-3 or 6-2, and maybe not 6-2 because I don't know that the Giants would trade with Washington, but 6-1 with Chicago. I don't really want to look at that aspect. Joe Shane talked about this week at the Combine, the fate they have in Daniel Jones. And again, what is Joe Shane supposed to say when you're paying Daniel Jones the amount of money they're paying him right now? And right now, if I'm the Giants, I want to take a look at getting pieces around Daniel Jones to see if he's really the answer. I get it. The guy hasn't been able to get through a full season the way you would like him to. He's going to hopefully be healthy for training camp after the ACL. Could you see the Giants maybe looking at a quarterback later in the draft? Sure. I think there's a lot of depth, especially with the 2 second-round picks that they have, to look at a Bo Nix, to look at a Michael Penix. I doubt J.J. McCarthy will be there with the way his draft stock is going, but you could go further down the board, maybe get a developmental guy. There's options there. So for me, from the Giants, like I said, I'm starting wide receiver. Roma Dunze from Washington is going to be the player to keep an eye on. That's a guy who grew a lot with Penix last year, made a lot of deep catches down the field. I think that's the kind of player you'd look for if you want speed. Malik Neighbors from LSU, I think he's going to be another player to watch. If you want to go further down the board, it's not really as crazy a wide receiver class, but if you look at first-round guys like Keon Coleman out of Florida State, so there are options at the wide receiver position. I think if you're the Giants as well, you want to take a look at the defensive side of the ball. Dallas Turner on the edge, I think, would be an interesting fit. But I think the goal for the Giants is to get Daniel Jones some weapons. Because think about this for a second. You're probably going to lose Saquon Barkley to free agency. The Giants aren't going to tag him. It doesn't really sound like that by mid-March. They're going to be able to get anything done going into free agency. There's not a lot of big quarterbacks on the board. I mean, not quarterbacks, wide receivers on the board because T. Higgins got franchised. Michael Pittman, Chris Ballard, the Colts GM, said this week they're likely going to not let Pittman reach free agency. You would think Mike Evans is staying in Tampa Bay, but that's probably the last big name out there, and Calvin Ridley. So the Giants aren't going to really be able to get that big ticket wide receiver option in free agency. You're going to lose Saquon Barkley, so you have to at least owe Daniel Jones giving him the shot with some significant weapons. Because think about what the Giants front office, whether it be Dave Gettleman's regime or Joe Shane's regime, they haven't put really much together. Like Darius Slayton is probably the best big name guy. They drafted Jalen Hyatt, but there hasn't really been that go-to receiver for him. And don't you think if you're going to make a decision one way or another on a guy once his guaranteed money is up, you owe him that much to give him a shot? So to me, from the Giants, I'm looking at wide receiver. In the Jets, I'm looking at tackle. I know Joe Douglas mentioned this week about Elijah Vera Tucker being back, and that's going to be a big help for them. They did release Laken Tomlinson this week, so that's going to help save them some salary cap space, which, by the way, the cap keeps going up. And it's crazy every time you talk about teams need to restructure this, restructure that, restructure this. There's constantly a bunch of cap space in the flow. So every time you think your team doesn't have a lot of cap space, they always find a way to make some more, but that's besides the point. I don't think the Jets at 10 could really make the significant move up to get a quarterback, nor do I think Aaron Rodgers would be very happy if they did. A lot of the reports are that Caleb Williams has met with the Giants and the Jets. I'm sure that a lot of the Drake Mays and Jaden Daniels will probably meet with the Jets as well, just in case there is an opportunity to move up or if somebody does fall out of the top 3. But I don't think the Jets would take their significant draft capital in a year where they have to win and go out and get another quarterback. Even with the Jets giving Zach Wilson permission to seek a trade, which is about time. But I'm looking at tackle, and a couple guys, Joe Alt from Notre Dame, I think is the most pro-ready tackle in this draft. J.C. Latham from Alabama is going to be a guy to watch. Olu Fashamu from Penn State. Talise Fuagwa from Oregon State's another name. The intriguing name this week, in terms of non-offensive linemen, because I think if you're the Jets, that's the biggest goal in this draft, is to improve that offensive line. Brock Bowers out of Georgia. Mel Kiper in his latest mock draft for ESPN had Brock Bowers at 10. I like that name for the Jets. Getting another explosive weapon at tight end. He could be that next Travis Kelce, TJ Hawkinson kind of guy. You already have Garrett Wilson in the fold. I think if the Jets wanted to go wide receiver and look at Malik Neighbors, they could do that. Get some more speed into the mix to pair with Garrett Wilson. But Bowers would be a really fun fit. And I was watching an interview he did with Connor Rogers, and he said there was 2 guys he's looking forward to catching passes, would love to catch passes from, Patrick Mahomes and Aaron Rodgers. You're in the position to take him, and if Bowers does fall because of teams needing edge rusher or quarterback or offensive line, you could get Bowers at good value at 10. So from the Jets, it's tackle. I'm watching Bowers. You know the Jets love looking at edge rushers, so Jared Verse from Florida State I think is going to be fun to watch what he's able to do this week. Which begs the question, when you look at the Combine in general, should everybody that goes to the Combine have to do everything? And you saw Marvin Harrison isn't going to do very much at all this week. Caleb Williams isn't going to do much at all this week. Even though the interviews are very important, it's the biggest stage in NFL scouting circles. And I get the pro days are more controlled atmospheres, but if you're that big a top prospect, shouldn't you have to do at least some drills or some kind of things? But remains to be seen. Taryn, I agree. I love when the NFL draft starts. I think it's big for me. It's more I get into around the mid-April. I think when it's 2 weeks till and you get more information, I think that helps. And also, Taryn says, between the Chargers and Giants, I have those 2 taking Bowers and Neighbors respectively. Bowers would be fun for the Chargers. Giving Justin Herbert a quality tight end, I think that would be fun. And again, the speed that Neighbors has, I think is something the Giants will desperately need this year in this Mike Kafka kind of offense. But of course, with the Jets, we got to talk about some negative things. And Mecole Hardman was on the Pivot podcast this week, former Jet wide receiver turned Chief Super Bowl champion. And he mentioned that The Jets wanted him to take punts in the preseason, but Hardman said it was more for a rookie, so Xavier Gipson did it. Gipson had the punt return for a touchdown to end the Bills game week 1. And then Gipson hurts his ankle before the Chiefs game, which is week 4. And Hardman was never mentioned until the day of the next game that he was going to return punts. And it's kind of like we don't get that communication from your boss until it's like the last minute to do something. But then Hardman also says this. In the preseason, he dislocated his pinky, was dropping punts in practice, and the special teams coach, Brant Boyer, calls him out for it. And Hardman said on the Pivot podcast, I'm going to be hurting the team if I go back there because I'm not going to catch the ball. I was so checked out. I already spoke to Brett Veach, and Patrick Mahomes come get me. And this is where it benefits the Jets. You're talking about a player in Mecole Hardman who actively reached out to another team and said, go get him. You have a case if you're Joe Douglas to file tampering charges and get an extra draft pick. And that's a big deal. But it also speaks to the Jets not having a feel for their players. Like, if you know the guy's got dislocated pinky, why you calling him out in practice? Why, if you see this guy not dropping 6 or 7 punts, and it's not normally his thing to drop a lot of punts, don't you at least go up to him and say, hey, man, I noticed you're not doing this. Is something going on? Are you hurt? What's the big deal? And there's just no communication. And this Jet coaching staff is really one that's hard to trust. They've made some changes, but that's the base of the problem. If your players aren't believing in what the coaches are selling, that's a big deal. But Hardman at the same time knew he wanted to get to a favorable situation. Probably should have tried to find a way to stay to Kansas City to begin with. And there's a bigger issue to that. Like the punter this week, Thomas Morstead, he was on Twitter yesterday. And he said, be careful getting information from disgruntled former employees. Getting beat up by a rookie free agent after being guaranteed millions of dollars is tough to deal with. Entitlement is a killer of opportunity. You have to earn it every year. So there's clearly, there's 2 sides to every story. You also had the tweet that Sauce Gardner put out that accused Hardman of leaking the game plan. Which, someone's got to tell Sauce to stay off of Twitter. Or stay off of X. Because he ends up getting himself into more trouble than he does if he didn't post anything. Always got to be careful before you hit send. It's just so much with the Jets that's just very, very confusing. It never seems like they can get out of their own way. And then last to look at the NFL for this segment. So the NFLPA released the player survey this week. And what does that mean? 1,700 players provided feedback on teams, treatment of families, food, cafeteria, nutritionist, locker room, training room, weight room, all those things. So let's start with the Giants. They got a C in treatment of families. Their food and cafeteria got a B. Now, the food and cafeteria is ranked 8th out of the 32 teams. They got good food, apparently, at the Giants facility. They were an A- in the training staff, which is 2nd in football. So if you're a player looking for agency and you want good ways to get back into training, Giants are the way to go. They got a B+ in strength coaches, a B in the weight room, a B+ in team travel, so they travel well. The big things to look at are head coach got an A-. That's 13th in the NFL. So players do like playing for Brian Daboll. And he's willing to listen to the locker room. 100% of the players felt Brian Daboll is efficient with their time. So he gets the most out of what we're looking to do. That's progress. The one negative is nutrition and dietitian. The Giants got a C+, which is 27th in the league. Only 67% of players feel like they get an individualized plan. But besides that, I think the Giants, you could say, did pretty well. Now let's look at the Jets. Jets got a D- in treatment of families. What that means is they're one of 12 teams that don't provide a family room, which it's 2024. You got to have something to help the fathers out there. They provide daycare on game days, but the number of players want the family room during games, and they're frustrated that they can't get their kids down there before the game, but the corporate partners are there. How is that a thing? Like, you've got to make your players feel like they're valued, and if they want to get kid on the field before the game, why is that such a big issue for owners? I've never struggled with that. That's crazy. Food cafeteria, they got a C-. They ranked 26th in food freshness. That's not good. They did get a B+ in nutrition, which is great, but they got a C- in the training room, one of the worst in the league. They get a C in training staff, 29th overall, which is awful. Weight room strength coaches, they got a B-. Robert Saleh did get a B, but keep this in mind, B is only 24th in the league. And Robert Saleh, being only somewhat willing to listen, is 29th out of 32 coaches. Now, you're not going to find a lot of things. Take the survey for what it's worth. The Chiefs are ranked toward the bottom in a lot of categories. They're the reigning Super Bowl champions. So the survey is not gospel in a sense. But you have to at least take those things and take into account if we're looking at both these coaches going into what are hot seat seasons for them. Brian Daboll is in high favor with his players. Now, he wasn't with his past coaching staff, as we all know. But he's clearly kept the players engaged. Robert Saleh, on the other hand, he might have the ear of one player, being the quarterback, but does he have the ear of everybody in the room? That's what's telling about, yeah, you got a B, but you're still ranked toward the bottom of the league in terms of being being that coach that people feel gets the most out of their time. And in some instances, you've got to be somewhat concerned about that. Very quickly, Joe Douglas also mentioned this week the Jets are unlikely to franchise Bryce Huff. They'll try to work on him with a deal. Well, a lot can still change, obviously, in the next week. Remember, teams have until Tuesday to put the franchise tag on players. I think the Giants' biggest free agent to watch for besides Saquon is Xavier McKinney. Douglas said this week, we want to keep Bryce Huff, but there's a conversation we're going to be having over the next 2 weeks. But they will talk to Huff's reps at the Combine. So, a lot will happen. I think if you're the Jets, you also want to look at backup quarterback this offseason. But a lot is going to happen over the next couple weeks. It should be a lot of fun to watch in terms of the storylines. Want to remind you that this show, as well as the other shows here on IE Sports Network, or IE Sports Radio Network, is brought to you by Planet Jerky Premium Beef Jerky. Planet Jerky is the official jerky of the 2022 California League champion Lake Elsinore Storm, a single-A affiliate of the San Diego Padres. This all-brisket jerky has gluten-free options, contains no MSG, no sodium nitrate, low in sugar, high in protein. Planet Jerky, the jerky that's on a whole other planet. So we'll take our first break. We'll come back. We'll dive into the Knicks, who had one protest denied, and are probably lucky another protest was not filed. You're listening to New York State of Sports on IE Sports Radio. We'll be right back after this.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Davidson.
It's your boy, Dentarius Lava.
And we are the hosts of Fast Break here on IE Sports Radio, where we discuss everything in the world of basketball from prep to the pros.
You guys should definitely check us out, man. Sunday, 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Pacific. We got all the basketball information you guys need, so we look forward to you guys listening in.
And please do, because we are the best basketball show on this side of the Mississippi. And please do check us out on Twitter at FastBreakISR. D-Lock, where's our time again?
8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Pacific. That gives you guys plenty of time on a Sunday.
Tune in.
good, everyone? It's Drewski, the host of Heart of Texas Sports on IE Sports Radio, your direct feed for all that is sports. On this station, we cover everything in the Dallas-Fort Worth, Texas area. From we cover the Dallas Cowboys, the Dallas Stars, Dallas Mavericks, Dallas Wings, Texas Rangers, TCU, SMU, we cover it all right here every Wednesdays from 9 to 10 p.m. Central Time. Make sure you stay live with me on the Heart of Texas Sports on IE Sports Radio, your direct feed for all that is sports.
Get set to talk a little New York Knicks here on New York State of Sports on IE Sports Radio, direct feed for all that is sports. And a little bit of a rough patch for the Knicks, especially over the weekend. Now, they had the big win against Philadelphia when we ended our last show to start the second half of the season. Bojan Bogdanovic had like 6 for 6 from three-point range in that game. He was playing extremely well. And you look at the last 3 games for the Knicks, and it leads to a bigger issue for this team going forward. They lose to the Celtics, which obviously is no shame losing to the Celtics. Boston right now I think is the best team in the NBA. But it was the game Monday against the Pistons. The Pistons are awful. And I get it, the Knicks don't have OG Anunoby. They don't have Julius Randle. It doesn't sound like those players are coming back at least for the next few weeks. But you let a Piston team hang in there way longer than they should, and it took Jalen Brunson, another heroic performance with 35 points, and a controversial no-foul call on a scrum at the end of the game that really should have been a foul on Dante DiVincenzo. Leads to the Knicks getting the ball. Josh Hart gets an and one. Leads to a fiery, passionate rant from Monty Williams. And it's hard to blame him. He's already frustrated that his team has got 50 losses on the season. But it leads to a bigger problem for the Knicks, is they don't have the depth to get through this. You have Jalen Brunson and Isaiah Hartenstein missing the game on Tuesday. Pelicans absolutely destroyed the Knicks 115-92. Was not that big of a surprise. Zion had 21. Brandon Ingram had 24. Trey Murphy had 26. Now, albeit the Knicks were on the second of a back-to-back, it shouldn't have been surprising that the Pelicans won the game. I think they were favored anyway by 3 before the Brunson news came out that he was out with that neck issue. But the Knicks, when they lose a guy like Brunson, they don't have the players to really stay in the game. Keep in mind, they only use about 7 guys when Brunson and Hartenstein are out. The only 7 players that had more than 10 minutes, Precious Achiuwa, Jericho Sims, Miles McBride, Josh Hart, Dante DiVincenzo, Bojan Bogdanovic, and Alec Burks. And you want to keep using Bogdanovic off the bench because that's his strength. You want to keep using Burks off the bench if you can, because that's why you got them. They didn't get them to start. McBride's great on defense, but his shooting is inconsistent. Dante DiVincenzo's taken 21 shots. He made 7 of 18 from 3 just to keep them close in the game. But this is a Knicks team that, if they don't get these guys back, they're in trouble. And what I mean by that is, take a look at the East right now. The Knicks are the 4 seed if the season ended today. So I think you could end the question if they're going to catch the 2. I know they're 3.5 behind Cleveland, and it's not impossible with 23 games to go. But this is now a Knicks team that went from beating everybody to now they can lose to anybody on any given night with the way they're playing. And yes, you give them credit for the win, but I understand fans that look at that Piston game and said it felt like a loss. So they're 3.5 behind Cleveland for second. They're only a game and a half ahead of Indiana for the 7th spot, which is the play-in tournament. And nobody would have imagined, with the way the Knicks were a few weeks ago, that the play-in tournament would be a realistic possibility. And it's hard to be mad at the Knicks because a lot of this is due to injuries. No team could really sustain what the Knicks were sustaining. And now you've got to worry if you're keeping Brunson healthy. Like I mentioned, Anunoby and Randall, you're looking at March possibly. Mitch Robinson, you're looking at maybe March. But the longer it takes to get back, the more in trouble the Knicks are. Tonight they've got the Warriors, and I see Taryn's post here. Can the Knicks do the Lakers a solid and beat the Warriors tonight? I mean, you hope so. Golden State's favored by 4.5. They got Chris Paul back in the lineup. You know Steph Curry loves playing at MSG. I could see him putting up another mammoth performance tonight. But no Andrew Wiggins for Golden State. Maybe that helps the Knicks, but it's hard to trust them. They're going to win right now. And then going into this week, they've got the Cavaliers Sunday night on ESPN. Atlanta at home on Tuesday. And then when we come back, we'll preview the game next Friday against Orlando. But Orlando all of a sudden becomes a big game because the Magic are 8th in the East. The Knicks then have a back-to-back with Philly and then a West Coast trip. So the schedule doesn't get easier. The Cleveland game, I think, gets magnified. And right now, this team needs somebody to step up and kind of be that player that carries for a game or two. Bogdanovich did that against Philly because the Knicks went from being up 24 at one point to being only up 3, almost blew the largest lead in the NBA this year. They were able to hold on. They've got to find a way to contribute and take it to another level, if that's even possible. If you're looking for some fun off-season rumors, on Thanasis Antetokounmpo show this week, Donovan Mitchell gave his top 4 road arenas that he likes to play in. Madison Square Garden was one, along with TD Garden, Barclays Center, and Staples Center. Obviously, Donovan Mitchell's going to be one of the players people keep the most eye on this summer, whether Cleveland moves him or not. But the Cavaliers are having success. I don't know why you would unless Mitchell forces his way out. Ralph, what's up? Thank you, man. I appreciate you tuning in. As I mentioned, the Knicks got a protest denied from that Rockets loss where I think a foul was called, but it should have been called. Jalen Brunson led it 3 free throws. And what were Knicks fans expecting? The NBA was not going to go, hey, we screwed up a foul. We're going to come back and play overtime in April at some point. It was never going to happen. I like the last 2-minute reports myself in the NBA because at least it gives some accountability. As you can tell from this first segment in the first half hour of the show, I'm a big fan of accountability. But I understand fans that say, all right, why are you telling me it's your fault? You didn't change it back then when you could have. Some things just aren't viewable. Human error is a thing. And during the course of a year, you get screwed on one game, but you end up getting it back at some point in another game down the road, and it evens itself out. So you can't worry about that too much. Nets, on the other hand, they're now 4 games behind Atlanta for the final playoff for the 10 seed, which is the last spot in the play-in. This week, they won 1 out of the 4 games that we previewed. They lost to Toronto, blowout fashion on Thursday, lost to Minnesota by 15 on Saturday, did beat Memphis on Monday, 111-86. And you have Dennis Schroeder with 18 to lead all scorers. Cam Johnson, 12 off the bench. A good balanced attack. They shot 48% from the floor, 35% from 3. And were able to hold the Grizzlies in that game to 38% shooting. So good signs all around. They did, though, lose to Orlando by 27, the second game of a back-to-back. Big game tonight, though, for Brooklyn against Atlanta, especially with the Nets being 4 back, 24 to go. This is essentially a must-win. They've got to find a way to take this game home. Nets lost the first meeting by 2 in overtime on November 22nd. They beat Atlanta by 1 on December 6th in Atlanta. So it's been a kind of a split in the 2 games. That both those games are at Atlanta. So Brooklyn gets that game tonight. Most likely a must-win for them. Then, actually, they get it today back-to-back. So they play Atlanta on Saturday at Barclays. So 2 games at Barclays, and you could argue the Nets need them both. to feel like they have a shot at the postseason. If they get both of them, they get Memphis at home again, winnable game, and then Philly on March 5th before the Pistons and Hornets. So Nets have an opportunity. This is their season beginning tonight. But let's keep it local before we go into our next commercial. Last week, you have a situation in which I said about St. John's, they had to beat Creighton before I talked about them again on the show. Largely because I was frustrated every week talking about the negativity around the program, the inconsistencies that they were playing with. And I don't know if Rick Pitino showed them this podcast. I don't know if they kept reading the clippings that people were giving up on them. But they've turned a new corner. And now the optimism is back up. And I was talking about it last week. I don't know why people would doubt Rick Pitino and the way he does things. He has a method that works. So on Sunday, they beat Creighton 80-66. Denise Jenkins had 27 points, 12 of 18 shooting. But what's impressive about what the Red Storm did against a top 15 team, and you saw what Creighton did to Seton Hall last night, absolutely destroyed them. The Red Storm shot 47% from the floor, held Creighton to 23% from three. They forced 13 turnovers and only had 3 on their end. So when you have 24 assists, you're sharing the ball, and you only have 3 turnovers. That's massive to a team. You don't see that in a lot of cases, especially against that quality of opponent. I wasn't shocked they won the game. But I'll tell you what I was more shocked about. What they did last night. Last night they played at Hinkle Fieldhouse against Butler. They beat Butler early in the year in a game that most bracketologists and analysts said the loser of that game, their at-large chances were pretty much done. They had to win the Big East tournament to get in. And we have yet to see St. John's play consistent 40 minutes of basketball. And they've been able to do that. 82-59 was the final. And they got scoring from everybody across the board. Glenn Taylor, who's been clutch these last 2 games, both with his defense and his corner 3 shooting, 17 points. Chris Ledlam had 10. R.J. Lewis, 15 points off the bench, had one of his better games of the season. And they did that with Jenkins only making 4 shots, 8 points, and Jordan Dingle only scoring 9. They had 7 players get 20-plus minutes. So this is a real balanced attack. And you're talking about fans wanting to see more Simeon Wilcher in the lineup. You're talking about more people wanting to see more minutes from Zuby Ejiofor, who had 10 minutes backing up Joel Soriano, who had 13 rebounds. And still you want to see him emerge offensively. But this is a St. John's team that has played itself back on the bubble in the NCAA tournament. Their last 2 games before the Big East tournament, we're going to do a big Big East tournament preview either this week or we'll record something for the show the following week, because that's one of my favorite events here locally is the Big East tournament. St. John's has DePaul and Georgetown, the 2 worst teams in the Big East. St. John's just beat Georgetown by 5 in a game they dominated for the bulk of the game, and Pitino even says they played horrible in that game. And they blew out DePaul in UBS Arena out in Long Island. And DePaul's won like 3 games this year. If St. John's holds serve in both those games, which they should, that gets them to 19-12 overall, 11-9 in the Big East, which is an accomplishment. Albeit they've lost a bunch of games this year that they probably should have won. In fact, to get close to 20 wins and have an over 500 record in the league, that could change a lot of stuff. So that helps. That probably gets this team at best 6th in the Big East. The 6th seed likely plays DePaul in that first game on Wednesday. That first round matchup. So let's give them a win. Then you get Creighton or Marquette. If the Red Storm win the next 4 games, I think they're in. And there's a lot of factors at play that help. Their net ranking is very good. I think it's inside the top 40. The Butler win last night was a quad 1 win. They have 2 wins over Villanova. Now, why are those Villanova wins important? Villanova's playing their way closer into the tournament. If Villanova beats Providence on Saturday, They have Georgetown and Seton Hall. Villanova wins out, and Nova becomes a team that gets in. You now can say, if you're St. John's, we beat them twice. You have a win over Utah. Right now, Utah is, I think, 50. Steve Lapis was saying on the broadcast last night, Utah is 53rd in the net. If Utah gets in the top 50, you now have that win, and Utah's a fellow bubble team. You have a win over Providence, who is on the bubble. That helps you. You have 2 wins over Butler. What I think the dream scenario, though, would be if St. John's finished 5th, gets a win over Seton Hall. But then that would put them on UConn's side. There's some people that think they have to get to the final in the Big East tournament to get in. I don't agree with that, especially if you look at the last 10. Pitino's starting to get this team playing better fundamentally. And I still think Rick Pitino plays some cachet. The thing that hurts St. John's, like we talked about in past shows, is their wins in the Big East tournament, unless it's against UConn, Marquette, or Creighton, are considered quad 2 wins, not neutral court quad 1s, which I think is ridiculous. But I would then love Rick Pitino to embrace that and say, let's get all of our fans in the stadium. Let's make this a real home court game, if they're going to treat it as such. That could hurt them. That could make them have to do more than they need to. But for this team to save its season shows a lot of resolve. And I think they've got a shot to make a deep run if they continue playing the way they've been playing, at least in the conference tournament. Seton Hall, on the other hand, disappointing performance last night. 85-64 loss against Creighton. And they have now a tough stretch of themselves coming up. They've got at UConn on Sunday on CBS. Going to be a tough game. Seton Hall beat UConn earlier in the year. A win over UConn would probably punch their ticket, I think. If they lose that game, they have Villanova on March 6th at the Prudential Center. And we talk about a elimination game that St. John's Butler was last night. Villanova Seton Hall next Wednesday could be an elimination game for one of those two. And then they end the year with DePaul, who they should beat. So Seton Hall, I think you're looking to go 2-1 at the minimum. If they're 3-0, I think they get it. Right now, they're on that last 4 in. I think St. John's and Joe Lunardi's bracketology got to the first 4 out. So they're playing themselves at least back in the conversation, as we mentioned. Locally in the Big Ten, Rutgers takes on Michigan tonight. They're 14-13. Syracuse, their next opponent, they're going to take on Louisville on Saturday on the ACC network. Syracuse with a win would get to 20 wins. Problem for Syracuse is their non-conference schedule is, to put it lightly, they lost to Tennessee, they lost to Gonzaga. Their best win is LSU. They did beat Oregon by 20, but not a lot of crazy wins for Syracuse. I don't think they played themselves into the mix at all, even though they're going to finish in the top 6 in the ACC. But the ACC doesn't have the conference strength that, let's say, the Big 12 has, or the SEC, or those big conferences right now. So that hasn't helped them in any regard. So we'll take our last break. We'll come back. We'll talk Rangers, ending February with their best month in franchise history. What does it mean going forward? We'll talk some soccer, and we'll talk some baseball with spring training underway. You're listening to New York State of Sports here on IE Sports Radio. We'll be right back after this.
Hockey fans, I'm Adam Kernick.
And I'm Zach Puplis.
Together, we are the newest version of Hockey Talk on IE Sports Radio, The Neutral Zone.
Zone.
We love hockey, but we also know it's not everyone's first sport. So we want to make this show as much for new fans as for the diehards.
Whether you can name all the Swedes on the 08 Red Wings Stanley Cup team, or if you can't tell if Varlamov is a goalie or the latest trendy vodka, we're here to help. With facts, figures, and outrageous fans, we bring you all the hard-hitting hockey news you can handle, while still keeping it fun and on the rails. Well, mostly.
So tune in every week as we go around the hockey world, from college to Canada, the minors and the majors, and everywhere in between.
So bring your cellies.
And your one-timers.
You wicked wristas.
And be sure to protect your 5-hole.
Catch the Neutral Zone every week on IE Sports Radio, your direct feed for all that is sports.
We promise not to pick on the Arizona Coyotes every episode.
What's happening, sports fans? Are you a fan of Southern California sports? Are you looking for a show hotter than a hot summer day in California? Then look no further than the SoCal Supreme Sports Show, where I talk about all things Southern California sports. That's right, all sports teams from Southern California. From the hard-hitting tackles of the NFL, to the killer crossovers and big three-pointers of the NBA and WNBA, to the grand slams of the MLB, to the bone-chilling goals of the NHL, and to the booming kicks of the MLS. The SoCal Supreme Sports Show has it all for you. Oh, and let us not forget about the college sports as well. So join me, Taryn Rodriguez, every week here on IE Sports Radio, your direct feed for all that is sports.
Welcome to the 305, aka the Magic City, and this is Magic City Scoreboard. I'm your host, JB, and right here we're going to talk anything Miami. Miami Dolphins, Miami Heat, Miami Hurricanes, Marlins, Panthers, Inter Miami, and even high school football. So join me once a week right here on Magic City Scoreboard on IE Sports Radio, your direct feed to all that is sports.
Magic City Scoreboard, part of our Thursday night lineup, which you can catch later on tonight after we're done here, 7 p.m. Eastern. Fun show there. 8 p.m. we have the Extra Mile with Darryl and Christopher, all things auto racing. By the way, humble brag, I am kicking butt in the auto racing competition here that we have on IE Sports Radio. I got like 2 second place. I picked 2 guys in the 2 races so far. They finished second both times. Maybe I'll pick the winner this week. Who knows? I think it'll get me, though, with Formula 1 and IndyCar. But maybe I should tune in. Maybe I'll get some good picks. That's at 8 p.m. Eastern. And then at 9, the Sports Couple of Perspective, Larry B. and Cecilia, having some fun there. So definitely a great Thursday night lineup. You should check it out here on IE Sports Radio. For the last 9 years, IE Sports Radio has brought you amazing content ranging from interviewing legendary athletes, coaches, and other authorized media personnel to building tailor-made shows dedicated to all cities around the country, such as New York. Make sure to follow IE Sports Radio on Twitter or X at IE Sports Radio, Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, so you keep up with all the latest sports and with our shows. You can go to the website, iesportsradio.com, catch the latest news, IE Sports Radio blog, Hall of Fame, Fans of the Month, podcast pages, our shop. A lot of cool stuff going on, so you want to check that out. Moving from the hardwood to the ice, and look, it's hard to ignore what the Rangers are doing right now. They end February with a 10-1 record. After all the question marks involving Igor Shesterkin in net, he goes 7-0 in February with a .953 saving percentage. Artemi Panarin's playing great at offense. They get the 4-1 win over Columbus last night, erasing the loss from Sunday, which you kind of knew the Rangers were going to have a letdown at some point. They had been playing so many close games, so many grind-out games. They had the emotional wins over the Islanders at the Stadium Series, the good win over Dallas, the win at Philadelphia on Saturday, which was a good game. And you knew that eventually you're not going to have that every game, and the Rangers just didn't have it. So they take the loss there, and then they bounce back last night. Matt Remfe's been kind of that fun, aggressor, intimidator kind of guy you like to see. But I think this Ranger team knows that just being right now the best record in the East isn't going to get you into the goal of a Stanley Cup. And I think that's what this team's goal has to be. They underachieved drastically last year with Gerard Gallant. Peter Laviolette has them playing well. And it leads to what we've been talking about for the last couple weeks. Trade deadline is a week from tomorrow. They've got to get aggressive. They have got to find a way to make the moves that are necessary to get this team a cup. Yeah, Jen, we had the Rangers had to feel like we get to give the Blue Jackets an opportunity, which I never get why they have these that at least was a back-to-back where you go to Columbus, you go to New York. If we talk about Hawks Nets, why do we have 2 games back-to-back in the same building? I always get confused by that. So if you look at the Rangers right now, there's a couple things that they need to get to really assure themselves the best shot at a cup. And what is to get some help on the right wing on the top line. They were trying Capo Caco there last night. Who knows if that's to maybe try to showcase him for some trade value. I doubt with all the injuries they would try to do that, but you never know. But you have to get some help on that top line. And the other one would be a third line center. Got to find a way to get some help with those 3 lines. Make every line scoring options. And I think the question is going to be with the Rangers, they don't have a lot of cap space. They've got $5 million in cap space. They've got to find a way to make things work. And David Pagnato reported on Twitter that Vladimir Tarasenko is willing to waive his no trade to go to a contender from Ottawa. Tarasenko was on the Rangers last year, familiar with the system. That would be a guy you'd look to probably bring in. Frank Vetrano from the Ducks would be a name that's familiar with the Rangers, helped them get to the conference finals a couple years ago. Jordan Eberle from Seattle is a good player. He's a veteran. I think you need that veteran presence here. That's a guy I would look into. Adam Henrique, former Devil, also in Anaheim. The Ducks GM was supposedly there last night, or somebody from the Ducks was there watching that game. That's a guy to look at. You want to go different, you want to go to the Sharks. Anthony Duclair, former Ranger. That would be a player you would take a look at. So plenty of options on the board for Chris Drury, and the point is they need to find a way to get a move done. And I get that they don't want to give up too much of the future, but you've got to make that happen if you want to win the Stanley Cup, or at least get to the Stanley Cup. Because right now this is a Ranger team that is fun, that is able to maneuver across the board. But they've got bigger fish to fry. Right now they've got 83 points, 7-point lead over Carolina with 22 games to go. They have a 1-point lead on Florida and Boston for the best point total in the East. And this is going to be a tough week for the Rangers because they've got some good tests that they've got coming up to begin March. They have a game tomorrow, Saturday at Toronto, potential first-round opponent that can score a lot of goals between Austin Matthews and John Tavares. They have at home against the Panthers on Monday. Panthers are a good team. And then we can kind of re-examine where the Rangers are at on the next show, because after the deadline, they get the Blues at home, Devils at home, at Carolina, and then at Tampa. So a little bit of a tough stretch for the Rangers, but they've got the team to pull it out. The question is going to be, can this excellence be sustained and keep going? Devils, they end up splitting the back-to-back games, beating Montreal Saturday, losing to Tampa Sunday. They get a big offensive outburst on Tuesday against San Jose with a 7-2 win. They score 4 goals in the third period after getting down 1-0 after the first. Jack Hughes puts up a couple. Nico Hischier picked up a goal. This is a Devils team that's going to win games with their offense, but they've got to find a way to get some help in goal going into the deadline. Devils right now have 64 points. Islanders are the only local in action tonight. They're going to be taking on the... So I'll pull that up in a second. We'll give you the Devils schedule first. Devils are at Anaheim on Friday, at Los Angeles Sunday afternoon on TNT, and then home to Carolina on Tuesday, home to the Blues on Thursday. So those are the Devils schedule. Islanders at 62 points. They picked up a big overtime win against Pittsburgh last week, as we mentioned, lost to Tampa on Saturday. They picked up the overtime win at Dallas. They get Detroit tonight. They're 8 points behind the Red Wings, so I would look at being 4 back essentially as a must-win for them. They're home to Boston on Saturday, home to the Blues on Tuesday, at San Jose on March 7th. So Islanders will be looking to do some things there. We talked some soccer last week. Both local teams had their first game of their season, and it was mixed results. We'll start with the NYCFC. They took a loss to Charlotte 1-0. Charlotte picked up a goal from Addison Malanda in the 8th minute. And the problem for the Red Bull from NYCFC, just 2 shots on goal. Charlotte had 5. And in a game where NYFC had 62% of the possession, to not find a way to pick up that equalizing goal on the road is a little bit disappointing. So Nick Cushing's got to find a way to fix that on offense. They are going to be taking on the St. Louis FC coming up Saturday night at 8:30 in St. Louis. Red Bulls, they get a good result. They go to Nashville and they get a 0-0 draw, which is my least favorite result in all sports. But you have a team, you look at the stats from that game, Red Bulls led in possession, more shots on goal, more corner kicks. Nashville's got a good performance in net from their goalkeeper, Joe Willis. But I think you take the point on the road and you run with it anytime you get that opportunity, especially to open the year. They get the Houston Dynamo on Saturday. Dynamo lost they tied their first game with Kansas City 1-1. As for NYCFC against St. Louis is coming off of a 1-1 tie against Salt Lake last Saturday. So big games for both of these teams, especially coming off of ties. Nobody that NYCFC or the Red Bulls are playing has a win yet. So second game of the season, we'll have more to react from next week. Baseball, I think you look at the Mets situation. Kodai Senga had a PRP injection, shut down for a little bit, so you're looking at probably May where he can come back to help this Met rotation, which means you're going to be watching more of the spring of guys like Jose Quintana, who looks like he's going to be the opening day starter. Adrian Hauser had a decent spring debut against the Marlins on Tuesday. I wrote about that over at metsmerizedonline.com. I'll have also more on the Quintana start tonight against the Astros. It's not on TV, but I don't think it's on LB Network locally. But what is Luis Severino does when he takes the mound, so the spotlight is on the Met rotation. But you're seeing the top prospects like Drew Gilbert playing well, Jet Williams is playing well, and Trace Thompson, Clay's brother, has had home runs in back-to-back games. You tend to ignore spring training results unless it's guys that are trying to make the team or prospects, because I think those are the guys that would be looking to make the most noise in camp. So I would keep that in mind. It sounds like, though, according to Andy Martino of SNY, the Mets are looking at some more pitching. And they've looked at a guy like Julio Teheran, who signed to a minor league deal. Who signed for the Orioles, by the way. So the Mets are clearly looking at other pitching options. Whether it might not be Blake Snow or Jordan Montgomery, maybe it's Michael Lorenzen. Is another name who's been in the NL East, that has starting and relieving experience, that probably won't cost that much. I think that would be a name to look into. The big news, at least in baseball this week, Cody Bellinger signing back with the Cubs, got a 3-year, $80 million deal with a couple opt-outs, which leads to the Yankees. And again, the Yankees keep getting connected with Blake Snell. I don't see it. I think it's Scott Boras trying to keep the Yankees involved. Remember, there's technically a rule in Major League Baseball that you're not allowed to say that you're not interested in a player, because for some reason that rule, if a team comes out and says I'm not interested, it lowers his value and stuff like that, and I don't think that's right. I don't think why a team should kind of pretend they're interested in somebody if that is the case, because if you're the Yankees, you can't even get Blake Snell a short-term deal, because every move they make on the luxury tax counts double. They're over $300 million in payroll. So Hal Steinbrenner can't make that other expenditure. They offered Snell a contract. He didn't take it. They pivoted, went to Marcus Stroman on a cheaper option, and I think they want to see what Clark Schmidt does in camp. They want to see what Nestor Cortez does in camp. They got a guy in the mound tonight on the Yes app and Clayton Beater, who they got in the Joey Gallo trade from the Dodgers, who could make some impact this year. Will Warren's a guy that they like, who had a good spring outing yesterday in relief of Schmidt. So there is options there. Chase Hampton. You could look at the trade market for the Yankees. Dylan Cease would be the number one guy out there, but Dylan Cease recently switched his agency to Scott Boras. And yes, you'd have a year and a half of Dylan Cease, but is it worth giving up the prospect capital to get him? You could argue yes, because you're in a win-now mode. But how much do you have to give the White Sox to make that happen? So I said Beater tonight against the Marlins, Quintana tonight against the Astros. But something to keep in mind, we're just in the beginning stage of spring. Season does start earlier this year, March 21st, Dodgers, Padres, and Seoul. But we still have at least, about a month until the openers. Mets are home to the Brewers. Yankees are on the road in Houston, which should be a lot of fun. So we have some fun discussion topics over the next couple of weeks. The NHL trade deadline, as I mentioned, is next week. Try to maybe try to get somebody on the show to talk some trade deadline. That should, maybe the Rangers make a move between now and 2 p.m. Eastern next week, where we can talk about that some more. The Big East tournament, we'll try to dive into a little bit more next week as well, if not the following week. So much to talk about in terms of big local sports in the New York area. So again, Combine this week, Knicks in action. I love Knicks Warriors. I think it's going to be a lot of fun. But yeah, thank you all for tuning in this week. I want to remind you, you can follow me on Twitter at Rickinator555. That's at RICK, letter I, Nader like and Terminator 3 5s. You can follow the show on Twitter at NY State Sports IE. Again, it's at NY State Sports IE. And I want to hear from you. Send me your questions, your thoughts, your comments, anything you want me to talk about on a future show. I am happy to hear from you. And be sure to follow the network on Twitter at IE Sports Radio, your direct feed for all that is sports. So thanks, guys, for chiming in the chat. Taryn, Larry, Jen, Ralph, all of you are awesome. Again, coming up later tonight on the IE Sports Radio Network, 3 shows for you. Magic City Sports at 7. You have the Extra Mile with Daryl and Christopher at 8. And then the Sports Couple Perspective at 9 Eastern. So 3 more shows coming at you over the next, coming up later tonight, beginning at 7 p.m. Eastern. So it's been a pleasure talking to you guys this week. Weather's starting to get warmer. February's in the book.